All right, everyone. I think we are live. Sorry about that. I was having issues with Internet Explorer, actually. So I tried it in Chrome, and it looks like maybe we are working. So, uh-oh. Now I'm getting a message that it's not working correctly. So we'll see. I did post a little question on our Princess Bride site on Edmodo. So hopefully you can take a peek over there and let me know if you are able to hear me. So hopefully this will work. I know we've had some technical difficulties lately, so here we go. All right, my name is Anna Wilson. I work for the Coeur d'Alene School District, and tonight we are covering the Princess Bride, and we are talking about pages 219 to 288. So this is basically the part where Fezzik and Inigo are trying to find the man in black, whom we all know as Wesley. This section ends with a big foreshadowing moment. The ending is, and so with an urgency that would soon turn to deep regret, he and Fezzik approached the zoo of death. So that is where our section stops. So let's all agree that some of us could not put the book down. I am one of them. I had to read to the end. I could not stand to all these cliffhangers. So no spoilers. So if you have read on like I have, I know I talked to a few people. I think Nick was one of them who has only read to page 288. So we have to all pinky promise that we are not going to spoil it for those who have not yet read beyond this point. So let me see. I am going to refresh Edmodo and see if we have some people who are able to see me. It's working. Yay. Okay, well, welcome. All right, so here we go. We have a lot to talk about. This particular section, this 219 to 288, is called Festivities. And when it opens, our narrator, Goldman, reveals that he has cut out a lot of information. So in that first page, he does say, though, I've cut out a lot of information, but three important things have happened. And this is why it's important to make sure that you are reading those things in parentheses, those italics. He says there are three things that are important. I've abridged a bunch, but here are the three important things. Number one, everyone is convinced that the kidnapping plot was engineered by Gilder, and the relations between the two countries are strained. So that's important. The second thing he reveals is Buttercup is adored by everyone because she acted so brave and made it through the fire swamp. He says that is important. And finally, Prince Humperdinck is at last a hero in his own land because he foiled the kidnapping and made everyone realize how brave he is, right? Well, how interesting that at the beginning of this section, I thought it was interesting that the author refers to Prince Humperdinck as a hero, but just a few short pages later, it's revealed that, in fact, he is not. So on page 244, we actually discover that he is trying to kill Buttercup. He has a plan to kill Buttercup on their wedding night. And it's also revealed that he is the one who hired Vizzini, Inigo, and Fezzik to kidnap and kill Buttercup to begin with. So those are big, like, aha moments as I was reading the book. So did anybody see that coming? I didn't see that coming. I knew that there was something a little strange about the kidnapping, and I knew somebody was behind it, but actually I thought it was going to be the Count, who seemed like a real baddie from the beginning. But the prince I did not see coming. So, but the Count, we find out later he's kind of a sick guy. So anyway, it just kind of got me thinking a little bit about a theme that we've kind of talked about, those of us who have presented so far, about how this is kind of a fairy tale story, but how it's kind of this non-traditional fairy tale type of story. And this would be maybe an example of that, where typically the princes in the fairy tales are kind of heroes, or at least maybe not the bad guys or the flat out just a murderer like Prince Humperdinck is. So that was another twist for me in the story. And that's what I loved so much. I saw that Ava and a couple of other people said they really loved the story. That's part of what I loved about this story, is there are a lot of twists and turns. So very fun. More on the twists in a little bit. We'll build to that tonight. So this section kind of got me thinking about heroes a little bit. If you read further, and I promise no spoilers, I think there are multiple heroes in this story, but at this point, I'm curious who you think is the biggest hero. I think, based on what I just talked about, we could agree it's definitely not the prince, but maybe at this point I would argue for Wesley. Maybe Wesley is the hero of the story, thinking about how he went through such incredible lengths to save Buttercup from the kidnappers and all of that. However, I don't think he's a perfect hero. Much like we've already talked about, this fairy tale kind of has twists and turns, and so I think Wesley has faults. So that's my first question I'm going to pose to you tonight. What faults do you think Wesley has as our hero? So we'll see what, oops, I put Wesley, it's Westley, sorry. There we go. All right, so I'll post that up there and let's see what we get for faults as our hero. One of the things I also, so I'll wait for you to post some things, but I'm also going to keep talking too, because it's very uncomfortable to just sit here and wait for people to respond. So also at the beginning of this section, we find out what happens to Inigo and Fezzik when they wake up on the cliffs of insanity. So if you remember in this part, they've been incapacitated by Wesley. He is chained up Inigo at the top of the cliffs of insanity after defeating him in this fierce sword battle. And he has clubbed, or actually he choked Fezzik out and left him kind of passed out on the mountain trail. And so I thought this section was interesting. We find out what happens when they wake up, but it also kind of tells us a little bit of a backstory about the relationships between some of these characters. And so, in fact, throughout the novel, there's a lot of information about the relationships between the characters and how they depend on each other for survival, that kind of thing. So here would be an example. Once Inigo and Fezzik discover that Vizzini is dead, they're both totally lost. They're so interdependent on each other. Inigo heads back to the thieves' quarter, thinking that he'll reconnect with Fezzik, and immediately starts drinking and kind of falls into this terrible, battle with alcoholism again. Fezzik is forgetful. He's so dependent on Inigo and Vizzini to help him remember things and to function that he forgets the riddle to help him, or the rhyme to help him remember to meet back at the thieves' quarter. And so he just kind of is adrift for a while. And so we see through these examples how intertwined these three characters are. We also know that Inigo and Fezzik have lost their parents. Probably Vizzini is the closest thing they have to a parent, both of them at the time. And so this is the first time for me in the story anyway, where I started to see these two characters as individuals who maybe are vulnerable. Not, just the jerks who have kidnapped this princess, these mindless thugs, but individuals who have dealt with tragedy and now have experienced a loss and are kind of adrift. So it was an interesting section for me in this book. So definitely, as the book goes on, a lot of character development for these two characters. So on Edmodo, we have a few posts, thank you, Zach and Brooke, about what faults do they see in Wesley. So Zach says he seems only to care about Buttercup's safety. Yes, absolutely. He goes through incredible lengths to save her, which could be a good thing too. And Brooke says that Wesley should have told Buttercup that it was him in the black and expect her to love him again. So are you saying, Brooke, is that arrogant? Is he a little arrogant to assume that she would love him again? Or are you saying that maybe he should have told her sooner? I did think that was interesting that he did not tell her until, she shoves him off the cliff and then he's, says his line. So we know that it's him. Although that did make for a lot of excitement and tension. Okay, so also in this section of the book, we also discover that Wesley is locked in level 5 of the Zoo of Death. I love that name. It's so creepy. A lot of foreshadowing in this section. So we get hints about what is going to happen in the book. They talk about Wesley kind of waking up. We know that bad things are coming, but we don't know what. Again, no spoilers. I have to tell you, though, I was not prepared for what happens. Our first hint that bad things were coming was that he's there in the zoo. He wakes up and he asks the albino man who is caring for him, who knows I'm here? And basically it's the albino, the count, and the prince. And we know that at least the count and the prince are bad dudes. So that doesn't feel well. And then we find out that the other 3 people who helped to get him into the Zoo of Death, they have actually killed, so that no one else literally knows that he's there at that point. So that was made me nervous anyway. I don't know about the rest of you. And then the author also tells us that Wesley knows he's going to experience pain in this Zoo of Death, and he's trying to prepare himself for that. But then the author says they broke him anyway. And then it just leaves us hanging. I hate and I love that part about the book. So it stops. It says they broke him anyway, and then we're off and we're learning about Buttercup and her nightmares. And I, for one, could not wait to get back to find out what is happening to Wesley. What does that mean? There's so many cliffhangers in this novel. So here's my next question for you. So the question really is about that idea of nervousness, of tension in the novel. So I'm asking you, were there spots in this section? Remember, it ends when they're going into the Zoo of Death, Fezzik and Inigo, to find him. So where in this section were you nervous for a character, or felt like the author, type and think at the same time and talk, just kind of left you hanging or dropped the story? What is one section where you felt nervous? Okay, so tell us about that. That was, like I said, that's part of what I loved about the book, is there were all of these moments where there was such tension I couldn't put the book down. Okay, so we'll wait for a few posts, but I know I just was talking about the interruptions that Goldman does in his writing. He some of his interruptions where he comes in, and that's the italics and the parentheses, where he comes in as the narrator and just kind of talks to us as the reader. Some of that he does to move the story along. And other times he's not moving it along. He's just giving us kind of a little background knowledge. And so I felt like one of the key times in the entire book when he does this was in this particular section of the novel, this 219 to 288. I had to turn the page. This is where he talks about his dad reading him the part about Buttercup marrying Humperdinck. Do you remember that part where he interrupts the story? The author is telling us, when he was a little boy, he was 10, his dad tells him that Humperdinck and Buttercup got married, and he's like, whoa, wait a minute, Dad, I think you read that wrong. That can't be right. That's not the way that stories go. The girl does not marry the bad guy, and the dad gets offended that his son has said that he's reading this wrong and won't finish the section. He gets mad and kind of closes the book and walks out and leaves his son laying there to fret about this the entire night. And then the next day he picks up the story and reveals that the whole marriage was just part of Buttercup's dream. And that was an important part of the story, this whole, interruption and sequence and dream, but that's not the part that I thought was critical. Sorry, I'm going around a long way here, but the important part I thought was on page 237, where he talked about this Edith Neisser telling him life is not fair. Do you remember that part where he was playing tennis and he lost, and his friend says, maybe next time, it'll be your turn to win. And Edith says to him, that's not the way it works. Life is not fair. Does not always work out that way. You may not win a match here. So that part I kind of glossed over when I first read it. It didn't really stand out to me too much until I went back and reread it as I kind of got ready for today's talk. And that part is pretty critical, because I will say there are several points in this novel when I thought, what? That doesn't seem right. That's not fair. That's not the way things should work out in the story. Even though I'm not the author, I think I know how they should work out. So an example would be when Buttercup and Wesley, for example, make it through the entire fire swamp with all the difficulties and perils that they experience, and then they get to the other side and there's Humperdinck and the troops and the Count. And so they go through all this terrible stuff and then they don't even make it out of there. So that was one of those moments where I thought, that's not the way things should have gone. They should have made it out to the ship and sailed away happily ever after. So lots of times like that. Another example maybe is the reunion, where we should have seen a reunion scene. We didn't see it. So my next question is about, is there a spot in the novel where you felt like that's not the way that should go? So let's take a peek here on Edmodo. I'm going to type this up, but I also see I've got a few responses here. Brooke felt nervous when Buttercup fell into the snow sand. Yeah, that was creepy. Can you even imagine? Shelby, you haven't read the snow sand part yet. I think that's in the fire swamp. That was really scary, the fire swamp. So here's my next question. Were there parts in the novel where you thought, that's not the way this should go? So I'm asking you to tell us what happened and what you thought should have happened. And my example that I gave on that was, again, they make it through the fire swamp. They should have made it to the boat, sailed away, and maybe Humperdinck could chase them fine. But for them to make it through the fire swamp and immediately have them waiting there and capture them, I felt like, what? That shouldn't happen. But anyway, let's see what else we have. Yes, Megan says snow sand is like quicksand. Absolutely. Very nice. Okay. All right, let's see. We've got some more. Let's see what else we're posting here. We've got the live chat on. Mrs. Jenkins agrees Wesley is arrogant. Nice. So some of the other faults that we have. Oh, Zach, good one. Wesley expects Buttercup's personality has not changed since he left for America. Very nice. Good one. We're talking, it looks like some of you have started a little discussion about, I'm multitasking here, the machine in action. Yeah, that's kind of scary. That machine is nuts. Okay. All right, so let's see. Other things that people thought. Brooke says, oh yeah, when Wesley died, definitely should not have happened. And thank you, Brooke, because that is exactly what I wanted to talk about next. I can't put it off any longer. I've postponed as long as I could. We have to talk about, that is probably the biggest that's not fair moment. I was saving that for somebody else, and thank you, Brooke, for saying that. Wow. Blew my mind when that happened. So let's review the scene. The scene was on page 283. Let me find it. Here it is. So Humperdinck screamed toward her then, ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down a long curving corridor to her room, where he tore the door open and threw her inside and locked her there, and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death. And down he plunged, giant stride after giant stride. And when he threw the door of the 5th level cage open, even Count Rugen was startled at the purity of whatever the emotion was that was reflected in the prince's eyes. The prince moved to Wesley. She loves you, the prince cried. She loves you still, and you love her. So think of that. Think of this too. In all this world, you might have been genuinely happy. Not one couple in a century has that chance. Not really, no matter what the storybook says. But you could have had it. And so I would think no one will ever suffer a loss as great as you. And with that, he grabbed the dial and pushed it all the way forward. And the count cried, not to 20. But by then it was too late. The death scream had started. Oh, can you believe it? That part blew me away. I couldn't believe that was happening. So again, cliffhanger, leaves us hanging. Major cliffhanger. Oh, lots of people on Edmodo say, yeah, Wesley's torture and death was definitely something where we were like, what? That should not have happened. All right, so here's a question for you. So in memory of Wesley has died. We've all established that. So let's reflect for a minute about what might be printed on his tombstone. So for the other characters, we might have something like, here lies Inigo, known throughout the land for his swordsmanship, right? Here lies Fezzik, known throughout the land for his strength. Here lies Buttercup, known throughout the land for her beauty. So let's finish this one. For Wesley, what should be on his tombstone? So here lies Wesley, known throughout the land for his what? Well, it'd be nice if I could type throughout. Try that. Okay, let's see what you come up with. I'm excited to see it. While you're looking at that, Brooke is saying she wished that they would have described the machine more. Yeah, you know what? Part of the horror of that whole thing was that it left it up to your imagination. But you know it's bad news, right? It just depends on how crazy your imagination got with that. Brooke says, oh, Brooke threw a question up there. Nice job, Brooke. What do you think about Humperdinck? Megan says he's evil. Mrs. Jenkins, he's interesting because he's not super evil. It's like he's kind of evil. I don't know, Laura. I got to disagree with you. I think he's super evil. I mean, did you hear that section I just read? He's out of control, insanely evil. All right, so let's see what we have for Wesley's tombstone, and we have about 4 minutes left. So anybody? Nope, nothing yet. Nothing on Wesley's tombstone. I'm going to keep going because I've got a couple more things I want to get to, and we're going to sign off in just a few more minutes. Okay, let's see. Let me go back to, I'm going to reference, here we go. Okay, Buttercup. I just said for Buttercup, on her tombstone, it might read something like, here lies Buttercup, known throughout the land for her beauty. But we also know that Buttercup is also quite brave. So she's demonstrated this in a couple areas. So I'm going to ask that one of you guys. Where in the story do we see Buttercup demonstrating bravery? I need somebody to type for me tonight. Where in the story do we see Buttercup demonstrating bravery? And while you think about that, I'm going to read a couple of these. So here is Wesley's tombstone ideas. Zach says, here lies Wesley, known throughout the land for his determination. Yes, we saw that when he tracked down those kidnappers and saved Buttercup. Megan, pirate skills. Absolutely. We know that he has good pirate skills. Awesome hair. I missed that part, Brooke. I have to go back and read that. That's funny. Good one. Okay, so where in the story do we see Buttercup demonstrating bravery? The Fire Swamp would be an obvious one. In this section that we read, the 219 to 288, definitely demonstrates bravery when she goes to the prince and just says, okay, I can't marry you. And before you told me I had to marry you or die, so I guess I have to die. So that's pretty brave. She's in the midst of her nightmares. She can't handle them any longer. She says, okay, I'll take death over this anytime, but I cannot marry you. So that was a pretty brave section. So really Buttercup is a pretty deep character. She's not very shallow. It's just not all about her beauty. There are other aspects to her. I like that about Buttercup. Okay. No, Brooke, I am not judging you about the hair. I just missed that part in the story. So thank you for pointing it out to me. All right, boys and girls. I'm going to post one more question on Edmodo when I sign off here in just a few minutes. I've got to pick my daughter up in 10 minutes. But I wanted to remind you about a couple things. First of all, I have never seen this movie. I am so excited. Mrs. Jenkins says she has seen this movie a ton of times. I think she said maybe hundreds on her chat. And so I am looking forward to seeing the movie. I'm very curious about it. So I want to remind you, next Thursday, the 25th, at the Coeur d'Alene Library, downtown Coeur d'Alene, from 6 to 8, Mrs. Jenkins is going to pop some popcorn for us. We are going to watch The Princess Bride together. And then she is going to lead us on a quick chat about the novel after the movie. So you may want to bring your book with you if you feel like you need to reference it. Feel free to bring your family members to the movie showing. That'll be fun. It'll be a good time. Everybody, I'm sure, will enjoy it. Also, next week, at some point during the week, Nick from the Community Library at Hayden is going to post a final question about The Princess Bride. You have to answer that question on Edmodo in order to receive next month's free book. Our March book is The Book Thief, which if you have not read it, I'm telling you, hands down. See, there's my alarm. I got to go pick up my daughter. Hands down, The Book Thief, amazing. You are going to love it. I'm not going to give anything away, but I have to tell you, it is one of my favorite books. Anyway, so again, next week, look for a post from Nick about The Princess Bride. Answer that to get your free book for March, which is The Book Thief. And finally, the 25th at the Coeur d'Alene Library, 6 to 8, popcorn and The Princess Bride showing. So I hope to see all of you then. I'm going to post one more question on Edmodo, and then I am going to pick up my daughter. So everyone, have a great evening. See you next week, and thanks for listening.